here. Thank you. This is Tuesday, April 13th, and this is the drill. The Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for April 13th. I have loosed you from satanic and demonic conspiracies. My child, remember my great goodness, which I have laid up for those who fear me. If you will keep your trust in me, my goodness will be yours in the presence of the sons of men. I will hide you in the secret place of my presence, and will keep you hidden from the evil plots of wicked men. You will be loosed from any evil domestic conspiracies that the enemy has plotted against you. I have hidden you from their secret plots and from the rebellion of the workers of iniquity, who sharpen their tongues like swords and bend their bows to shoot arrows of bitter words at the blameless. I have preserved your life from the fear of the enemy's secret plots. Prayer declaration. Hear my voice, O Lord, in meditation. Preserve my life from fear of the enemy. Hide me from the secret plots of the wicked and from the rebellion of the workers of iniquity. Though they talk secretly of laying snares for me and believe that they have perfected a shrewd scheme, you will make them stumble over their own tongues, and all who see them will flee far from them. I shall declare your wonderful works. Amen. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today. Please stand for the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. First period, geopolitics. So with regards to China, China's in the news because they're making aggressive actions against Taiwan, invading their airspace and this, that, and the other thing. There's a lot of people on the both sides, well, particularly the right. I don't usually listen to people on the left, but people on the right that are predicting a war. Some of them saying that it might be 2027. Why that date, I don't know, and I don't really care. But the one thing that has to be thought about that nobody's thinking about is, because the issue automatically comes up, we're friends with Taiwan, and China is our nominal, communist China is our nominal enemy. So what do we do in the case of China invading Taiwan? And I've got to, the first thing you've got to ask about is, what about our economic ties? We owe the Communist Chinese government lots of money. We sell them bonds, and they loan us money. That's what the bonds are. They're loans. And the idea is that for the Communist Chinese and for us is that they keep rolling over those bonds, and as long as they never call the note, we don't have anything to worry about. All we have to worry about is paying the interest on those bonds. So what happens to that if the Chinese, because I've heard some discussion in various places about how it is that we would take on the Chinese military and what kind of the costs that would be in terms of how many people might be killed and how many ships would be lost and things of that nature. But nobody wants to talk about the financial, the economic impact. If the United States goes to Taiwan's rescue and starts firing on Chinese ships and planes, why wouldn't the Chinese Communist government then simply call the note on our bonds and demand payment in full on the spot. We're in a very weak position that way. We don't have the money. We're into them for hundreds of billions, maybe trillions of dollars, and most of, or maybe all of that money we don't have. What would we do? Would we run around raising taxes until we could raise the money? Would we simply just keep printing dollars until we could come up with the amount of money that they're looking for? There's also the prospect of then the economic counterstrike here would be that the United States would simply freeze and disallow any businesses in China. As a matter of fact, the Chinese could very well just simply do it on their own by, taking Apple businesses away from Apple and using it themselves. But the United States could certainly do that as well. Tell Apple, sorry, but you're not going to do business in China anymore. And that hurts the communist Chinese because they're scared to death of a population of 1 billion people. And if those 1 billion people become unemployed, they're scared to death of the likelihood of a counter-revolution, or the way we look at it is a revolution, and overthrowing the communist government. So nobody's looking at the economic side of a war between the communist Chinese and the United States. And my question is, why would China put all this on the line over Taiwan? It doesn't make any sense. It'd be like going to war over Hong Kong. It just doesn't make any sense. It seems to me that the best way to go about it is simply, since there's business between Taiwan and the communist Chinese mainland, then you would just continue to do business. You would continue to infiltrate Taiwanese society, continue to put good communists in positions of power in Taiwan, and then eventually what's going to end up happening is that the Taiwanese will simply vote in a communist or communist-style government that will then perhaps link up with the communist Chinese across the strait, and then it's all done, and you don't have to fire a shot, and you also don't have to worry about any type of a revolution or counter-revolution amongst the communist Chinese people. So it would seem to me that would be better. Why is then communist China making all of these aggressive advances? The communist Chinese wants to find out about United States military power. What is our air order of battle? What is our naval order of battle, et cetera, et cetera? And one of the best ways for them to get intelligence about our military and how it operates is to go ahead and make aggressive gestures towards Taiwan and see how it is that the United States responds. So it may be something of that nature. But like I said, many of the pundits on the radio are basically throwing around war with China or communist China as though it's a sure thing, and as though they're going to be, the only consequences is going to be the continued liberation, if you will, of Taiwan, when in reality a war with communist China would have consequences that would be much more far-reaching for both the communist Chinese and the United States. Second period, more specifically civics, and even more specifically domestic policy, and as it relates to violence, gun violence. So there's another shooting yesterday somewhere in the United States. At this particular point, I don't think it becomes, other than for of course, the people involved, but from a standpoint of education, politics, etc., it's another gun shooting, another gun violence situation. What usually happens in this situation is there's gun violence, and every conservative in the country goes mute. they go running to the Second Amendment and the Supreme Court and hide behind them. And they basically tell the left, don't you come for our guns, because our big brothers, the Second Amendment and the Supreme Court of the United States, will kick your ass if you try. And it's weak, it's feckless, and it's unnecessary. The slogan that we've heard from the right, which is also weak and feckless and rather ridiculous, that guns don't kill people, people kill people, should be changed to guns don't kill people, revolutionaries kill people. And we should presume that every one of these mass killings, where you're killing more than one person in a go, so to speak, are revolutionary oriented, that the person that is committing these crimes are attempting to revolutionize society. It may be simply trying to revolutionize their family, it may be to revolutionize their city, or perhaps the entire country. But properly understood, they must be seen as revolutionaries. Remember that all actions have consequences, and that authority and responsibility are commensurate. If you assume the authority to promote revolution, as Nancy Pelosi does directly and indirectly, then you have to accept the responsibility for that promotion and the responsibility for unforeseen consequences, such as mass killings, mass shootings. That is the best strategy for conservatives. And there's a lot of people around the country that recognize that conservatives are really weak, that we are constantly on the defensive and are demanding from various pundits, Sean Hannity, Hugh Hewitt, etc., an offensive. And this is the way to do it. It's a counterattack. And it is a counterattack that is factual, that is truthful, that is correct. The fact of the matter is Nancy Pelosi and others on the Democrat side of our government promote, very often they promote it through silence. They allow things to go on in Portland, and they won't challenge people burning down buildings and otherwise creating violence and instability in our society in Portland, in Seattle, Milwaukee, etc., and other places in our country. And so they promote it sometimes actively by downplaying what is going on, calling it freedom or First Amendment issue, when it is there is no First Amendment right to destroy somebody else's property. So when they promote it either up front, they come out up the revolution kind of thing, or they're doing so tacitly by damning it with faint praise kind of thing, then they have to accept responsibility for a more violent society in general. So whenever there's shootings, the true conservative blames the left, because in reality, culturally speaking, the left owns this country. The left is the one that's been making all kinds of changes over the past 50 years to our culture, and they have to accept the responsibility for those changes, both good and bad, assuming there is any good to the changes that they have created. So whenever you hear about a shooting taking place, the first thing you should do is demand that Nancy Pelosi denounce revolutionary socialism, that she denounce political violence, and that furthermore, she should actually, since she is the cause of this political violence directly and indirectly, you should be demanding that she step down as Speaker of the House and to resign from the House of Representatives. And furthermore, we should be demanding that the Ethics Committee in the House of Representatives conduct an immediate investigation of Nancy Pelosi in order to determine whether or not she should be removed, forcibly removed as leader of the House of Representatives, and forcibly booted out of Congress. Third period, civics, more specifically we're looking at the definition of partisanship. Partisanship has gotten a bad name, and the reason that it's gotten a bad name, and that the reason that so many people on the right have been discouraged from being partisans, while the left continues their partisan ways and attempts to revolutionize our society, is because we've been brainwashed to believe by the left that partisanship and truth are mutually exclusive, that you can either speak the truth or you can be a partisan, but not both. That's crap. The fact of the matter is, I'm a partisan conservative, and I'm a partisan conservative because I know that conservatism is what's best, not only for me, but for my family and for our civilization and for the entire world. And so, armed with that kind of confidence, there's no reason for me not to express myself and what I see and understand in the world in partisan terms, particularly since being a conservative means being realistic. Fourth period, psychology. So this is from the book by vox-day called Social Justice Warriors Always Double Down. So he's got his laws of social justice warriors. First law of social justice warriors is social justice warriors always lie. And he has a quote here as an example. Quote, Trump and his minions are in the driver's seat attempting to pose as respectable participants in American politics when their views come out of a playbook written in German. The playbook is Mein Kampf. Ron Rosenbaum, unquote. Ron Rosenbaum, author of Explaining Hitler, The Search for the Origins of Evil. Second law of social justice warriors. Social justice warriors always double down. Quote, I refuse to accept the U.S. election results. We, the first targets of Trump's xenophobic thuggery and dangerous delusions, we the Muslims, the Mexicans, the African Americans, women, we are here at the forefront of defying Trump's ignominy along with millions of other Americans. We, the most recent immigrants, are now safely at home at the dangerous delusions of an angry mob of white supremacist zombies shielding its wild fanatics behind democratic politics, unquote, from Hamid Dabashi, professor of Iranian studies and comparative literature. Wow, what a surprise there. Third law of SJW. SJWs always project. Quote, Hillary Clinton said Friday that Donald Trump is threatening America's democracy by not promising to accept the results of the presidential election. Quote, we know in our country the difference between leadership and dictatorship, and the peaceful transition of power is something that sets us apart, unquote. Clinton told a crowd of about 1,600 at the Cuyahoga Community College in Cleveland, unquote. That's Clinton. Trump threatens democracy by not accepting election results from the Cincinnati Esquire. And let's see here. There's got to be a fourth. Let's see. Here we go. No further social justice warrior laws. So there's the three of them. Chapter 3, though, does with defending the narrative. And starts with this quote, social justice and social equality is every individual's responsibility to uphold and protect. Aside from the social justice issues that are recognized and not addressed, a whole slew of other social justice issues exists that have yet to be globally acknowledged, from something called the Pachamama Alliance. As I described in Social Justice Warriors Always Lie, SJWs mindlessly following the social justice narrative are rather like a school of fish, moving together in perfect harmony with every twist and turn it takes, no matter how convoluted or contradictory it might be. Each SJW is highly sensitive to the current position of the SJWs around him, which allows for rapid changes in direction according to the needs of the narrative. George Orwell memorably labeled their thought processes in 1984. The SJW ability to engage in doublethink permits them to readily accept that war is peace, that day is night, that blacks cannot be racist, that kidnapping and torturing a white man is not a hate crime, that Russian intelligence denied Hillary Clinton the U.S. presidency, and every other momentary belief the narrative requires them to simultaneously believe, no matter how absurd or false or self-contradictory it might be. And I wanted to go ahead and say that the more they engage in this behavior, the more they need, psychologically, politically, and in every other sense, conservatives. As I've said before, the left likes to operate in fantasy land and in fantasy mode, but strictly in fantasy mode. Again, I use the analogy of AOC, who goes out and comes up with the scheme of this grand vision that she has for a Green New Deal. But you don't see her doing anything to bring this about, to actually realize this sweaty little fantasy of hers. Now, on the other side of the coin is former President Jimmy Carter, whom I don't like as an individual. He has nothing but contempt for the American people. I'm so damn glad that he is not president of the United States anymore. And then I'm so also further glad that he stays out of the public limelight and doesn't give interviews very often. He's a rather mean-spirited little man, but I give him credit for walking his talk. He talks a lot about compassion and all the other socialistic so-called values, and he goes out and he does something about it. He's involved in something called Habitat for Humanity, where he volunteers his time, picks up a hammer, puts on some gloves, and actually produces or attempts to produce the vision that he has in his head. Unlike AOC and her minions and peers that have absolutely no interest in breaking a sweat to create the so-called paradise that they wish to create. They rely on conservatives to do that for them because we are realistic. And so they count on us to go ahead and build their empire, to build their paradise. And so by doing what's been described or being described in this book, where they're basically getting further and further away from reality, they just keep contradicting themselves but ignoring the contradiction. The more they engage in that kind of behavior, the more they need conservatives. And that gives conservatives a tremendous amount of power. The next time that you have somebody in your family or at work that asks you or is proclaiming this particular vision, is, let's say it's the Green New Deal, you can say, okay, that's fine. Who's supposed to build that? Who is it that's going to go ahead and tear these buildings down? Who specifically? Are you going to do it? Are you going to put on a pair of gloves and grab a hammer and tear all the buildings down and rebuild them in according to your dream specifications, your fantasy specifications? Who is it that's going to create the bridge for an electric train to Europe? Who's going to do that? Are you going to put on the gloves? Are you going to pick up a hammer and go make that or go build it? And if you're not, then who is? And you will shut them up on the spot. Because the answer is something they dare not admit, that they're expecting you to go ahead and build that vision. They will come up with the visions, and you will create them. And you will do it by force if necessary. But again, they're not going to tell you that to your face. So remember, the weirder these people get, and they're getting weirder and weirder by the day, they're absolutely coming out and openly defying reality in so many different ways, the more that they get weird like that, the more that they're going to end up relying on conservatives just to even live their lives, to be honest with you. And so that is going to give conservatives like you and I, particularly me, because I'm the only true conservative in the United States today, a tremendous amount of power. Because again, also if they come out and admit and say, well, yeah, it's you who are going to build it, then you simply say, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to build your sweaty little fantasy. I'm simply going to opt out. So if you want to put me in a gulag or you want to put me in jail, you go right ahead. But I'm not building anything that you want to create. So, by the way, which reminds me, as on an aside, Ayn Rand was as described many times in different books that, and particularly in her fiction of Atlas Shrugged, that the people of the means of production, the productive people in our society, go on strike. That's her big fantasy. The left had a fantasy and a threat, the threat of the general strike. And that's the way that they would irritate and annoy the establishment, so to speak, is by threatening this myth. It was called the myth of the general strike. And so Ayn Rand is in effect creating a counter myth, which is a myth of the strike of the means, the men of the means of production. The people that are architects and CEOs and the thinkers and builders in this country. And the idea is if they go on strike, then the country definitely comes to a grinding halt. But she's wrong. It's not the builders and the thinkers and whatnot that are going to go on strike or even should go on strike. The people that should go on strike are the consumers. That you and I have so much power in this country that we don't realize. It's unrealized power, and one of them is the power to decide whether or not we are going to purchase or whether or not we are going to go ahead and put our money in the bank. And I've mentioned this before on previous podcasts, that the Japanese economy for decades remained stagnant because for a very simple reason, and that is because none of the Japanese people wanted to spend their money. They would simply put it in the bank. And in a Keynesian economy, that's death. Savings is crap in a Keynesian economy. The idea is you spend, and even if you have to get credit to spend. And the same thing goes here in particularly in the United States. We're supposed to be the engine of the world's economy and the driving force behind the world's economy. So stop and think and imagine what it would be like if we had a general strike of consumers. Because we're being treated like crap anyways. We're being taken advantage of. There are people that just assume that we're going to put up with anything and keep spending. What if we said, no, you know what? I was thinking about buying a car, maybe next year. I was thinking about buying a house, maybe next year. I was thinking about buying maybe a new refrigerator or something, maybe next year. In the meantime, I'm going to go buy some CDs. Or in the meantime, I'm going to put my money in the stock market. I'm going to do something else with my money. But I refuse to spend. I'm going to spend less money going out to eat. I'm going to spend less money going out to see a movie, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the consumer goes on strike, and in so doing brings the economy and very possibly the world economy to a grinding halt. Well, that's it, kids. That brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And be honest, be smart, and be beautiful. Always remember that the left has no power, it has no authority, and it can't win.